So welcome back to 34O. In this episode, I'm joined by Andy. Andy is a man from New Zealand who's been living in London for the past 6 years. Andy is a very grounded and with a steady presence, but also a deep curiosity about love, intimacy, and what makes relationships thrive, and sometimes fail. And today we're going to explore his personal journey, what he has learned along the way, and what it means to connect in a way that's both safe and deeply sensual. I'm really glad to have you here on the show, Andy. Welcome.
Well, thank you very much, Henrik. It's nice to be here. First time on the podcast, but I'm enjoying the opportunity to have a talk about some of the life lessons and how I apply them on a day to day as much as possible in life and in love.
That's beautiful. I think you're very brave to come on the show and talk as openly as you are. So I think it's beautiful. So anything else you want to add on your own background? You obviously you grew up in New Zealand and you moved to Europe, to the UK. So how do you feel? Was that transition easy for you?
It was an interesting transition for me. I used to think that growing up in New Zealand was just an average upbringing, largely because I just didn't have the exposure to the rest of the world. I come from a loving family with a mum and dad and a stable background. I've always had a loving hand on my back saying that I'll be supported if I fail. And it's not necessarily something I've leaned into or taken advantage of, but I think it's given me a sense of self that has really benefited me in my growth. I think I was really made aware of that when I first came over to the UK and explored and got an opportunity to see how diverse and multicultural it is and recognize just some of the extent of my privilege. Because at the end of the day, there are so many people that are raised and exist in worlds and societies, families where they might not have a lot of love that's given to them, and they might have to struggle for what people in my position have looked at as a given. Things like the security of a constant home as a childhood. Things like loving support and just knowing that you've got people that you can turn to if there is an issue or if you're feeling hurt. There's people in your corner that will stand behind you.
Oh, that must give you a lot of good foundation to stand on. That makes you feel a lot safe.
It does, and it's also in and of itself a little bit risky, and I've learnt that because to some degree, as beautiful as it is, what it's then done is it's given me a naivety or even an ignorance to the rest of the world up until that point, and I'm still learning now. But just meeting some people and being in the face of some of their lived experiences and recognizing I've got no grounds on which to connect on this, and just recognizing that there's a difference in life that shapes.
That's beautiful. So how would you describe if we put the lens here on sort of love and intimacy, how do you feel like your journey has been when it comes to love and intimacy?
I fall in love easily. And I think I fall in love easily because I haven't been hurt. I hadn't been hurt. I think it's given me life in New Zealand and a secure, safe upbringing has given me an idea of what it is that I look for in a relationship dynamic. I look at my parents who are still together and love each other, and yes, they might have had years when they might not have seen eye to eye on a lot of things. at the end of the day, they're invested in each other, and they're working towards living a long and happy life. But I think with life comes experience, and through what am I trying to say? Through looking at the approach that I took to then recognizing negativity and holding space for myself and for other people around me. I think there's a limited tolerance, a limited window of exposure that I allowed for myself and for other people, because I came from this background of happy, focus on the positives, live a good life, and be finding opportunities to enjoy yourself. It kind of meant that I was quite unpracticed when it came to being in a space where you might feel sad, and actually sitting with that and having patience with oneself to feel the depth of those feelings. So that, I guess, until the last maybe 18 months or so, when life happens, is not really something that I've had an opportunity to. As I sort of mentioned before, if you'd asked me with some of these questions 18 months ago, I probably would have given you a world of different answers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I appreciate that. So have you ever felt like you had to sort of perform a certain kind of masculinity? And if so, what did that look like for you?
Yeah, I mean, I guess the question is, what does masculinity look like to me? I think I grew up in a house with mum, dad, and 3 boys, and there was a lot of power play dynamics. I was the eldest son, so I was always testing what the boundaries were. And my father's huge heart, love him dearly. He's a huge character. He's a military man through and through. He was quite good at separating military and home, but there was a boundary of, it's his house, it's his rules. And so that sort of imposed a little bit of the mindset of, okay, this is a PowerPoint that potentially needs to be pushed up against to understand what masculinity is. And to be honest, I look at Dad and I'm quite admiring of him and his life and the things that he's gone through. But I think he exhibits a stoicism that, yes, can give a hug and can spread love deeply, but it doesn't represent itself as oh, you're having a feeling. Let's discuss that with curiosity to understand why. In often cases, there'd be throwaway and comedic, said with love, but things like eat a concrete pill and harden up, or build a bridge and get over it. So it didn't necessarily, masculinity present itself as something that gives an opportunity to sit with negative emotions and to understand where they're coming from and why those voices are making noise and speaking out as they are. So that's not necessarily something that I had the experience or know-how to exhibit through masculinity. I think then for me that presented itself as being relatively dismissive of not only my own, but of other people's hurt or sadness. And I look back on it, and I don't necessarily look back on it with pride. But I had a friend who was going through some deep issues, experiencing some dark thoughts. And my response to that at the time was, don't think that. Let's go out. Let's go bowling. We'll distract you with some positive stuff, thinking that's a good thing to do. But in actual fact, in hindsight, what I recognized I did was just dismiss my friend's position and not really give it the gravity of where he's at. Now, I mean, they're still a wonderful human. They're kicking around, and we've developed our friendship to a much deeper degree. But it was an insight into myself to say, okay, how have I made someone feel this way by doing what I thought was actually a better action, rather than sitting in the negativity, to actually go out and spend that time doing something happy. I think that's that's the fix it mindset of the masculine world where I've come up from. And you sort of recognize your value by the solutions that you can provide. And that's not often what's needed. Sometimes through masculinity, it's just a safe place to be held and be listened to. Because sometimes there's no answer, there's no solution. People just need to be seen and recognized through the presence of you being there and actually acknowledging what it is that they're going through.
I think it's beautiful you say that, because what I see with when I've been talking to a lot of women here now on the show, I think one thing they actually lack from the men is really that thing that just sit there and listen and hear them. And guys quite often just go into that fix it mode, as you said, right? That it's just about, hey, you have a problem, let me fix it for you. So in one way it comes from a nice place, but it sort of undermines the feelings of the other person in that sense, right?
It does, and I think it's in some way, like I say, representative of the world that a lot of young men are brought up in. It's what can you do, what can you provide? Obviously, the old school traditional mindset of a man providing for a nuclear family is no longer the world that we live in. But there's a lot of traits that sort of carry on over from that. And a man's worth is what's his income, how strong a fighter is he, what can he do to protect his family and provide for them, as opposed to sit down and be soft and intimate and attentive.
Yeah, and I think that's an area where I think today, particularly now with a lot of women also being financially stable themselves, I think that sort of need has sort of shifted from what they look for in a man as well, right? It's sort of shifting more towards the emotional aspect that is needed. When I think also a lot of the guys sort of have a hard time actually opening up and talking about feelings and emotions, right?
Yeah, and I like to think it's changing. I'm just past my mid-30s now, and I talk with young guys in their early 20s or late teens as I have the opportunities, and they're quite happy to pause and say, look, this is my neurodiversity, and these are the feelings that I'm having, and these are some of the things that I'd like to talk or be a little bit more involved in conversation. So I hope the world's changing in a way that doesn't necessarily oversteer, but creates opportunities for more of a balance between people.
I would agree on that too. And I think that's also what I think this podcast is all about, actually helping to spread that message around, that by opening up and being more present, I think we can be creating a change.
It is a good cause, every bit towards the cause, I would say. Thank you for the opportunity.
No, I appreciate you being here. So, and you mentioned 18 months ago that it feels like that was sort of a pivotal time for you on your journey. And is that a moment where you think something shifted for you?
Yeah. I mean, is it 18 months? What are we, August now? Something like that. Not quite 18 months, but I was in a long-term relationship, which ended, and a few other sort of life elements came in. Given an opportunity, it's the best way to look at it, to look at myself in perspective, and look at how I approach my my ability to hold space and to be conscious, considerate for people around me. A bit of self-awareness came through. Really, I think there were a lot of areas as I sort of looked at that I could grow from as a younger man, and look at some of my actions that don't necessarily serve me, and I did a little bit of inner child work, and I think at the end of the day, me and my inner child we're good, but I'm reckless, and I'm reckless with myself, and I can be reckless with the people around me, and just looking at that and the impact of it, it's an opportunity for growth. A lot of people can live their life unchecked, and certainly, with my safe, secure background and having at the time when I came to the UK, which is where I'm at now, only planning to be here for a couple of years, I kind of picked up this extended holiday mode with life. So I wasn't investing in people or in a future here. It was sort of a passing mentality. I think that allowed for a dismissive mindset where it didn't necessarily factor in the realities of other people or the depth to which they might sort of be impacted by the waves of me passing through life. But as much as there are elements that I want to grow from, there's a lot of love for myself, and I think in the quiet times as I was sitting there looking at myself, I had an opportunity to look not to the inner child, but to the conceptual future version of me. I don't know why it wasn't intentional. It wasn't meditative. Tried meditating. I'm not really big on it, but it was in a quiet moment just with myself. And I imagined a future version of me who was maybe in his late 80s. And I saw him quite clearly in my mind. And he was walking along a train track. For some reason, he was topless. You could tell that at some point he'd gotten his life on track. He'd gotten healthy and somewhat fit. He obviously had not worn enough sunscreen because he was tanned and leathered. But he was good. He'd lived a life. And I think at that point in time, I was questioning myself and questioning a lot of my values in the world and who I am as a human. And I looked at him and I sort of just nodded. And he looked at me, paused, and nodded. And whether or not you believe in any of this or not, I don't even know if I do. But what I took from it is this future version of me, he's good with me. He's lived my life up to that point, and he's lived a lot more since. And he's okay. And so he has sort of become the person that I'm now living for at the end of the day. He's my truth. He's where I want to work towards, to honor myself, honor the future version of me. And yes, maybe grow from some of the more immature aspects of life and mature into sort of a man that I have more love for, more respect for, and can practice a lot more of that intimacy and emotional presence, which I think is incredibly valuable.
That's beautiful. Thank you for sharing.
Thanks. Yeah,
So,
I don't know if it's necessarily balanced or true, but it's a nice concept to envisage.
no, with that though, I mean, you mentioned here before about your upbringing, all these things about. It feels like emotionally you've been very safe. So, what does it really mean for you when you think about, first of all, yourself, but also when you're with a partner? How would you sort of elaborate on the emotional safety? Because it feels like you're a very grounded man, right?
Yeah, in a lot of ways. I mean, there's always wobbles in life as you exit your comfort zone and have new experiences that allow you to look at yourself in perspective. But I think through a lot of growth, I would say that for me, emotional safety for myself and for some others is it starts from like a listening, actually being there to listen and to understand where whatever voice it is that's speaking is coming from. If there's something that you need to tell yourself, something that someone else is telling you, putting value into that, understanding where it's coming from, and then actually just honoring that and putting consideration into how your thoughts and actions about yourself or with other people can then impact that. And it's about, I think, prioritizing that safety. But that can be things, as simple as just holding space.
That's a beautiful way to do it. For me, when you start talking then about holding space, and I think to even go there, I think you also need to think about vulnerability, and how do you feel like your relationship with vulnerability, how has it looked like through the years? Has it felt like easy, terrifying, liberating, or all of the above?
I mean, to be honest, I wear my heart on a sleeve, and I would generally say the first thing that comes into my mind for where I'm at. I don't think I've personally had many barriers in terms of being vulnerable myself. But in saying that, I think by having been dismissive of some of the negative spaces that I feel in the past, that in and of itself is an avoidant mindset. And in doing so, I'm stepping away from the ability to be vulnerable. I think, vulnerability now, yes, is something that you need to access to be able to hold space. It's something that I think is part of life. As much as enjoying the happy, the excitement, the lustful, there's value in actually appreciating when you feel uncertain or nervous or anxious. And I think there's a point where you sort of have to stop and lean into yourself and listen. There's a boardroom of directors inside yourself, and if one of them's making a lot of noise, there's a reason behind that. So you stop and you say, okay, I'm going to give you time. I'm going to understand where this voice is coming from and why. Is that vulnerability? It might be. I don't know.
I think it sounds like it, but I think what you also, I sometimes think about, like, we all have like these part personalities, and I like your analogy there with the board of directors you have in the mind, right? So
yeah, it's actually one that my brother told me a few months ago as I was sort of working through some things in life, and I had a lot of deep feelings in there, and I really wasn't at that point in my life equipped to sit and hold space for myself and understand where these feelings are coming from. But I do well with analogies, and obviously he does too. So he shared that with me, and it's one that I've taken forward.
yeah, I like it a lot. So it seems like, you mentioned here that you were not equipped with all these tools. So do you feel like there's been situations where you wanted to be met emotionally, but you weren't? And in that case, what did you do at that point in time?
Yes, it's not necessarily that I wanted to be emotional, but I couldn't. It's that I didn't have the ability to understand why I was emotional or what was the key reasons behind it. And I'm not one of those guys who translates it to anger or to loudness. I've never been one to punch a wall, but definitely, like, there's points in my life where I've felt deeply sad and I have wept into a pillow.
Yeah.
It's not something that's ever held me back. There's definitely been space, but what it would be is I would weep into a pillow, and then I would brush those tears away, because at some point I needed to harden up, build a bridge, get over it, and move on with life. And I think it's that forced stoicism, which I do believe has a place in life, to stiff up a lip and get through what it is that you're going through. But I think that needs to be to get through to where you are right now, so that you can then feel those emotions in a safe container. The emotions should be felt. Sometimes through the practicalities of life, you can't necessarily have a breakdown in the moment. You need to get back to your bedroom and find a quiet moment and sit there and reflect. And if that means you're going to get deeply sad and feel the depth of those, then good. I think that's the right thing to do, because a lot of ways we hold on and we compartmentalize because we need to get through to finish the day of work or whatever it happens to be, so that people can't see us being sad and emotional. But I'm sort of blessed with a community at the moment that allows and encourages me to be as emotional as I want to be. There's been points in my life where I have wept into the shoulders of friends, and I've been held. And, going back to what we said before, they haven't tried to find a solution. They've just held me. And that in and of itself is beautiful.
That helps a lot. So when we think about then adding into this, like masculinity, we talk about that, and then desire and shame and these type of things, have you ever experienced any tension between desire and emotional connection?
Let me think about that for a second. Tension between desire and emotional connection. I mean, I don't know necessarily about tension between the two. I think if you can operate them hand in hand, it's incredibly beneficial, not only for yourself, but who would be you're experiencing your desire around. Yeah, I think I have to think on that one a little bit.
That's okay. But have you ever then felt ashamed of your needs, either emotionally, sexually, or relationally?
Yeah, there's been times, not, I think, emotionally or sexually, but relationship wise, I think there's been points when I've looked at where I'm at and some of the capacity that I have to hold space for others and to turn up and to be in an ongoing state of tolerance and sort of the limitations that's then given for me to connect and be available to someone. I've looked back on with some elements of shame. I think that's through myself, and as we sort of talked previously, there's that mindset of needing to be a fixer. I think through other people talking to me and me holding space for them and trying to fix it.
Yep.
Trying to fix it again and again. Eventually, I get to a point where my tolerance for that situation says, well, if I'm offering a solution and the solution's not being taken, what's the point in having a conversation further? And that's caused issues. That's been, me getting fed up with a situation and then reacting or limiting what can then occur or be discussed or felt, because I'm questioning then what my value is and what contribution I can add if I've tried before and it hasn't gone anywhere. That's certainly how I felt at the time. But looking back on that, there's a bit of shame, because I think with hindsight, you obviously recognize that it's not necessarily being in a position where you need to fix something, but it's just hold space, be considerate, recognize where someone's at and their experience in their life, and just be there. So I think that was maybe it is a little bit tied into the emotional. I felt quite drained and put these boundaries up in life, which then translated to me not having an ability to be attentive or listening to someone else, which can completely understand how it then reads like that. It obviously wasn't for the betterment or support of people in my life who needed it at that time. So there's a bit of shame tied in with that.
Yeah.
But it also comes with growth, and that's part of what I've been on a journey over the last 12, 18 months on, is looking at that and seeing what comes as a result of putting these boundaries up or not being able to communicate where I'm at clearly enough in the time that I need to, ahead of it getting to that point. Not that it ever became explosive, but it just became distant.
Yeah. And that's another type of reaction you can get when you're triggered in a way.
Yeah, you just sort of start to close yourself off a little bit, isn't it?
Yeah. So, in your view, though, if we think about intimacy as another topic there, what do you think men today most need to unlearn when it comes to intimacy, or what behaviors men need to sort of deprogram?
I think the key one is the dissociation of intimacy and sex. And like, I think I can only speak for some of the people that I know, but there's a connection that exists in their minds that says, okay, if I'm going to be intimate with someone, we need to be naked. And that's not the case. You know, there's so many ways to be intimate with someone through bringing your sense of being, your presence into another person's space and just being there. Intimacy can be something as simple as working together on a combined task. It can be a father and a son playing catch or something. There's differing levels of intimacy, and it doesn't have to be physical to achieve that. It's two people both being present in the moment of what they're sharing, and that can be a myriad of things, I think.
Yeah, and I think I love what you're saying there, because I think a lot of the guys I've been talking to as well, they're very sort of performative. They're looking for performing, particularly when they think about intimacy, it's about performance. And for me, I think it's much more about actually sitting down and, to your point, intimacy can be so many other things than just being naked.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's there's almost more things than being naked that it can be.
I mean, being naked is definitely a part of intimacy, right? But it's not the only part of intimacy.
Oh, absolutely. And being intimate and naked is a fantastic thing as well.
Of course it is, but it's not
beautiful ways to experience that and to share that with other people.
Yeah, and I think for me, when guys can go into the physical intimacy when you're naked and not thinking about performing themselves, but actually being present in that moment, that's when you can create beauty together with your partner in one way, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I've had moments when I'm physically with other people and I'm not present. I've had moments where I'm, in the reverse role and I'm with someone and I know they're not present, and it completely changes the dynamic.
Yeah.
It almost makes it hollow to some degree. I think I've walked away from some experiences thinking, gosh, that really wasn't fulfilling at all.
Yeah, you almost feel more empty afterwards, right?
Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong. I've sometimes gone into environments knowing I'm not going to be present and incredibly intimate, and it's just a party of people connecting and having experiences.
Yeah,
that's fine. I don't think there's a requirement on every interaction to be intimate or entirely present. But I think if you're not, if your mind's elsewhere, and someone else's mind is there, seeking you, that can then leave them hollow. I think it's really good to sort of have a conversation. I quite like a conversation. I've got a few acronyms I can share for the time, but one of them, is a discussion point around meaning and understanding before any sort of act of intimacy. Where are you both at? Like, what's the meaning going into this? Is it something that actually you haven't been intimate with someone for quite a long time, and therefore this is a little bit scary and a little bit nerve-wracking, and can we put some attention into where we're at? I think it's beautiful to establish that with people.
I do agree on that, and I think a lot for what I've also seen is a lot of people think I think it's more about actually it's easier to give your body than your heart, right? In a lot of ways.
Yeah.
You can control your body, you cannot control your mind and your emotions in the same way.
That is true. There's definitely a limitation there, but maybe a lot of it comes with practice and.
True that. It's an interesting way to look at it.
I think conscious touch for the inner hippie inside me is
Yeah.
a really good way to sort of bring attention to the body and to where you're at, not only in yourself and how you're connecting with someone, but how they're then receiving your connection and your presence, and how they're giving you feedback, because you can then take that and understand immediately whether or not they're with you or they're elsewhere.
I like that. So you mentioned here before about some of the growth you've done healing inner work within a child. So are these type of practices or experiences that really help you grow in your relationship to yourself? Because you feel like you've done your journey, or you're on the journey, but also then in relation to others, if you will. Are there any other things you worked on?
On the journey, definitely on the journey. I think I've spent a good few years saying that my journey is done and I actually don't need to develop. Which, looking back on, gosh, there's so much to develop. I think I'm always going to be developing now. Shift in mindset. I think the journey that I've been on has allowed me to be a lot more present in myself and slow down. I think you mentioned slow down earlier. Take an expectation away from myself or any interaction, and just be present and appreciating each of the small moments. And if that's simply sitting there reading a book or doing a board game, there's power in being present with that. Whatever you happen to be doing at a given point in your time is where your attention is going. And I think people say money makes the world work. Yes, it does, but money can't buy time, and so time therefore becomes one of the most valuable resources, and you spend time through your attention. So it's what you're giving your attention to that then becomes what is valuable in life.
And that's that's also where you're present in that case, right? As you say, you're like, when you're truly present, it takes time to be there.
Yeah. And so the concept of is it a waste of time? Well, if you're being present and you're consciously doing whatever task it happens to be, then you're not wasting time, because you're spending it either on yourself or with other people, or in that moment. That's your intimacy with whatever it happens to be in front of you.
So do you feel there are parts of yourself that you've only recently started to accept or reclaim?
Well, I think future Andy is a concept that for me has in the past served me very well. I'm doing a lot of work for my development, for my growth, for my studies and career. And I think, as I mentioned, I sort of came to the UK with a bit of a holiday mindset. And very quickly, 5 years slipped by, and I recognized, well, in this time, yes, I've had a lot of experiences, but actual self-investment and looking at future Andy has not been a priority for me, because there's been other things that I've been focused on. And yes, those have been nice, but I'd actually lost a sense of direction, I think. So some of this growth as well, for this old version of me who's got leathered skin, there's a life to live and to work towards, and it's incredibly valuable to have a sense of purpose, even if you don't know what that is, other than living for yourself. So in terms of reclaiming something, that's definitely there. In terms of fixing anything that's broken, or parts of my childhood or inner child that hasn't developed or been okay with myself, I honestly think he's good. Like I feel comfortable in myself, and the growth that's in front of me is something I look forward to.
That was beautiful. Beautiful way to look at it. So you're going into the future with an open heart, basically.
Open heart, open mind,
Yeah.
I don't know what, my life is going to look like in 5 years, but but I know I'm going to walk towards it with eagerness.
Which is beautiful. So, what has been one of your hardest lessons when it comes to love or being loved?
Um, I don't think I've got any issue being loved. Like I certainly feel worthy of love. Hasn't been things in my life which have stopped me from feeling that. Maybe a bit of a hiccup along the way, but checking in with yourself, I feel that that's not an issue for me. In terms of the way I love, I mean, I think it just needs to be with consideration and prioritization of whoever happens to be in my life to validate where they're at and what they're going through, and looking at the shared value system that we have, and giving the gravitas of that to honor with not only my own but other people's perspectives and views on the world. It's not just something to take for granted, I think.
That's beautiful. So if you think about then, like you mentioned your future self, like the future that it's been serving you really well, but if you add in then relationships in that, what do you feel you're learning about building something lasting that is not just passionate, but also something that you will build in the future?
Yeah, so that's another thing that I've sort of been doing a bit of reading on, and podcasts, and it resonates with me. There's a big difference between lust and passion, and a sense of security and home. And I think lust and passion can come, in many forms through many people and relationships. Sense of security and calmness, that's incredibly valuable to have a sense of peace, not only in the home but in oneself. And I think that comes from an alignment in values and goals, and how you view the world.
Yeah.
If two people are misaligned in how they view the world or where they're putting their priorities, there's going to be conflict. There's going to be a clash in someone having to be in a state of tolerance, or someone not feeling seen, because what for them might be quite meaningful is actually just another Tuesday for someone else.
Yeah, it's beautiful when you say it like that. I mean, I see, for me, I always think about like emotional, intellectual, and sexual attraction when it comes to these things, or connection. And if you don't, and then you obviously have the core values being a key part of that, right? When you look into that, and that obviously can create conflict, as you say. So, on that, by the way, how do you navigate conflict or repair or even distance in relationships today?
Oh, still learning, still learning.
It's not an easy one because that's probably one of the hardest things everybody's working on in terms of how we get triggered and all these things, right?
Yeah, and I think there just, to some degree, I mean, there has to be an awareness of where you're at and where other people are at, and a recognition that it's not wrong. Some people have their feelings and perspective, and that's theirs. Like your feelings are real, your feelings are valid. I think what I used to do, is, and still do to some degree, like I'm learning. I'm a project in and of myself, but approach things from less of a philosophical perspective and more from a place of, I guess, philonikos, the Greek basis, but it's from a basis of defensiveness or justification. So if there's conflict in there, or looking for resolution, instead of saying, oh well, okay, you've got these feelings, can we understand like where they're coming from and why they're there? I very much used to approach the subject, well, those feelings aren't necessarily valid because this is the intent behind, what the action was, or this is how I view things, and therefore, you should change how you're viewing things. And obviously that's a road to nowhere. And I think, part of my ignorance is thinking that I'm right. I have this mentality of, well, I come from a safe, secure background where nothing's gone wrong, and therefore, I know how to look at the world with this positive, happy outlook on life.
Yeah.
It lends itself to sort of what I was saying at the start. It doesn't recognize what other people have gone through in life. It doesn't recognize, some of the nurture elements of people's perspectives. Yeah. And so there's almost a sense of battle that then comes of trying to change someone's perspective to reflect my own, and that's not right. It's not needed. Even if sometimes there's perspectives that say, well, have you tried looking at it from this perspective? It's not helpful in all situations. I think it's definitely been a learning lesson for me to recognize, okay, there doesn't have to be a solution here, but to understand and to validate whatever it is that someone's feeling or expressing or has qualm with. It's perfectly fine to hear that and to recognize it. You don't always have to align, but not being dismissive, I think, is the key one, and just being considerate to someone else's lived experience, because that's their truth.
Yeah, I think, when you're coming from a place of not needing to be right all the time, I think it's also a good place, right? When you, to your point, you can be not dismissive, and you can sit there and more or less agree to disagree to some extent, but
yeah, but also like shining a light on yourself and taking it as an opportunity to question some of your thoughts and your basis of viewing things and your perspective, because sometimes I'm wrong, and recognizing that and leaning into it. It's hard because I'm a stubborn ass sometimes, but it's worth it to create growth opportunities.
It's a very mature mindset to do it like that.
Yeah, it comes with experience. But it's an opportunity to sort of look at that and say things from this perspective. Why do they look at things from their perspective? Neither of them is necessarily wrong, but understand and accept. Sometimes easier said than done, but it takes the weight out of either person to be wrong. It just is an understanding.
Yeah. So finally, though, what do you long for most now when you think about both a partner in love and in life?
I would say that I think a sense of peace is really valuable to me. Like an alignment in the majority of core values with someone, I think is what I recognize as what I'm looking for in a relationship, and that can it doesn't have to be on everything, and they don't all have to be exactly the same, but it gives the opportunity to grow with someone and seek a life that you're both happy with, that works for you, and obviously there's other things like the desire to have shared experiences and to be adventurous and playful and into nature and all the other bits and pieces. But I think all of that comes through awareness, and you gain awareness through communication. And so there needs to be an ability to communicate, to talk through things that you're feeling, your insecurities, your desires, your boundaries, and to then respect those boundaries and to feel like they're going to be respected from you as well.
That's beautiful. Andy, thank you for opening up, sharing your perspective with all of us, and on what it means to be a man who leads with presence, honesty, and a really grounded heart. I think your reflections on safety, sensuality, and authentic connection will be inspiring a lot of people.
Well, thanks, Henrik. And I think that the key takeaway that I've got for myself is we're all human, and we're all going to grow through this process. But it's one that if you look at and you say, okay, I recognize I'm a work in progress. I recognize that there's opportunities for me to have these experiences and to recognize what works and what doesn't. Then you're holding space for yourself to then take on change and to develop yourself into a more well-rounded, insightful human. It takes time. You're going to make mistakes, but it's a journey and one that apparently is going to last me till I'm an old man walking around with grey hair and no shirt on.
And I think that 80-year-old man will still be there learning when he's there, right? So.
Oh yeah. Or he's going to be a stubborn old man and tell everyone to get off his lawn because he knows how the world works and that's just how it's going to be. But we'll wait and find out. I'll tell you in 46 years.
I look forward to that.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Andy. In the next episode, we'll meet Julia. Her story is one of awakening, from living in a world of shame and expectations to find her own rhythm of desire and trust. We'll talk about playful exploration, learning to ask for what you truly want, and the moment she realized that intimacy starts long before the bedroom.